Good afternoon. Maybe I should add to the history because that was a long time ago. So my name is Steve Davey. I work for IP Navigation Group. I've been with IPNav now for 6 months, developing the business. Before that, when I was at BT, I spent 12 years monetizing BT's patent portfolio. So really it's that part of my career, I guess, which is relevant to today's session. We're slightly depleted, I'm afraid, but nevertheless, hopefully we can generate a little bit of discussion today, as I think we'll get through the presentations quite quickly. I've got with me Anders Tangen and Olaf Ungara. Anders is going to talk about value and valuation of IP, which actually is a really important topic for anybody that has patents, portfolio of patents. How do you actually value them? He's CEO of IP law firm in Sweden, Braun, and has a doctorate in chemistry, I understand. Olaf heads the patent valuation team in ISO Spicer. He has worked with non-practicing entities. I'm going to talk about non-practicing entities in a minute. Today he's going to talk about how to value patents using the new German standard DIN 77100, and I'm going to be very interested myself to hear about that. It's not something I'm familiar with at all. So without further ado, so to speak, I'm going to kick off with a short presentation. When I was asked to chair this session, I thought I'd try and understand a little bit more about the Indian patenting activity. I guess I should say that I've been coming to India licensing intellectual property now for 10 years. Most of the licensing activity has been software, so licensing software code and concepts into the IT sector in India. And I hadn't really taken much interest in the patenting activity in India in that part of my career. So I wanted to sort of get myself up to speed what's going on in India with respect to patenting, because you never know, there may be some valuable patents here, and if there are, I'd like to speak to the people that own them. But when I was looking at this, I decided to title this Challenges and Opportunities for Indian Companies, because when I started looking at the intellectual property, the patents that have originated from what I would call indigenous Indian companies, and not companies that have based some of their research activities here, I was quite surprised at what I found. So let's just sort of start off, and I guess most of you here will be familiar with some of these transactions. I could have updated this slide with some of the more recent ones over the last few months, but this serves to show that patents as a commodity that is worth money has really come of age, particularly in the US marketplace, increasingly in Europe, and of course as the Asian countries begin to build their portfolios, the migration will move across into Asia. Fundamentally, the market has grown to be one that cannot be ignored by any company that owns intellectual property. And what I'm sure most people here are seeing is that increasingly the finance functions in corporates are taking an interest in patent portfolios, not just from the cost perspective, but what is it worth? When CFOs see transactions for hundreds of patents in the hundreds of millions of dollars, even $1 billion, they of course ask the question, well, how much is our portfolio worth? And this is beginning to happen now right across the piece. And it's important to remember that patents can both be a defensive tool and therefore a source of profit generation. and this is particularly important in the context of companies that have built up huge patent portfolios for defensive purposes and really have only just started to think about how to monetize some of those assets. I just downloaded a whole load of data actually off the USPTO. So up until the end of 2001, there were about 5 million patents had been granted. Not all of them are still current, of course, because not everybody maintains the fees. I think there's just under 3 live granted patents in the US. About well, just under half originate from foreign corporations. And so I thought, well, what's the position with India? And you can also do a search on the USPTO. You can download the patents from Indian corporations or any other nationality. And that is the graph of granted patents over the last 20 years. And you'll see there's remarkably few, actually. And this is an issue for Indian corporations that want to venture forth into established markets like the US and Europe. In terms of the subject matter of the patents, that's quite interesting as well. What I've just done here is plotted out the various classifications. And by far, the vast majority of Indian patents relate to pharmaceuticals and the chemical industry. I don't think that will be a surprise to anybody. However, there are some increasingly, shown by the red bars, patents in communications and IT sectors. And I also looked at who actually was filing the patents or had filed the patents that have been granted. And the green bars show what I would say are the indigenous Indian companies, whereas the blue are international companies that have got some form of activity in India, and those patents really contribute to the bigger picture in most parts for those companies such as IBM and General Electric and others. So if we look at the countries that have patented in the US, India really is, I'm afraid to say, just in the noise. And I'm sort of saying, as it is, really, the facts speak for themselves. And so monetization, in my view, for Stephen, yes?
Yeah, just a subsidiary question. That could be rational if Indian corporations only had very small businesses in the US. You didn't by any chance have a look at, are any of those figures easily available?
I didn't, and you're right. What I looked at this is from the perspective two, really. One is there a monetization opportunity now for Indian companies in the US?
Right.
Okay, that was the starter. And there are some actually quite interesting patents, but relatively few compared with other countries. And then my thought turned to, the thrust of that question is, well, okay, well, India is quite different to, for example, Japan. 20 years ago, Japan started to patent furiously in order to protect itself when it wanted to sell into states, the US and Europe, and so did Korea, and so did Taiwan. And over the last 5 years, so have the Chinese. And you can see, instead of a few hundred patents being filed and granted, it's the thousands, the tens of thousands. Indian companies have not recognized this and are not taking action, and they need to, because if they want to venture forth into the protected economies, then at the moment they do not have a portfolio to help defend them. So that's the... This is the plug for the company I work for. I think everybody does that. So what we do is we work with owners of patents, whether they are corporations, universities, individuals, non-practicing entities, and we think very effectively manage monetization in the US. We absolutely believe you have to underpin your strategy for monetization through the legal process. So we will advise our clients to file suit very quickly if the infringing party does not take up an offer to negotiate a license, and we will manage that process through for our clients. And one of the major considerations for any client that wants to take advantage of our services is, do they want to retain ownership of the patent, or would they rather move it into a different vehicle? And that could either be selling it completely or moving it into a special purpose vehicle, and they can retain some form of ownership. But in either case, it doesn't make any difference from our perspective. It's either the original owner that's the client, or it's the new assignee that is the client, and we apply exactly the same methodology and practices. It's just that, frankly, the litigating party is no longer the original owner. And this is a model which is beginning to hit the press a little bit now and is being more and more commonly used. So I think any of you that have been to some of the other talks at this conference will have heard a number of companies explaining how they value, or at least identify, the high quality patents in a large portfolio. And it'll be no surprise for me to tell you that we have our own proprietary mechanism, software for doing that. You have to do that if you're presented with even 1,000 patents, let alone 10,000 or 50,000. How do you get to the 5 to 10% that actually are going to make money? And the first step, you've got really to use a software tool. And we have one, and I just ran all of the Indian patents, granted Indian patents that are live, through the tool, and that's the profile. Doesn't really tell you anything other than that's what it is. The next step, if we were going to try to monetize any of these, would be to give it to a human who would then do some assessment of the patent itself, look at the marketplace, and work out whether or not there was a real monetization opportunity there. And of course, this is just a quality measure. You can have the best written, highest quality patent in the world, and if it doesn't read onto a market, it's completely worthless. So this is just a quality measure. It's not an attempt to make any statement about value. So that's really all I had to say. I'll just sort of summarize that. I've been in this game now for 12 years. And when I first started doing monetization of patents, it was a fairly specialist thing. If you were in a corporation doing it, you were way out on a limb. You weren't just in the R&D or the legal department. You were 2 or 3 stages removed again. It was pretty career limiting, but actually really interesting work. And that's why I did it. That is not the case now. It's a really vibrant market. CFOs are taking an interest. The CEOs are taking an interest. I was in Japan only last week, and a large corporation telling me that they'd moved their IP department out of R&D straight underneath the CEO. And I know other corporations are considering that as well. So this is becoming mainstream. If you want to enter a market, you really have to generate defensive patent portfolios. And many of the global companies have done that over the years, particularly out of Asia. And these patents now are being looked at to generate revenue. So it's a here and now opportunity. The Indian companies have relatively few US patents. Okay, so there really isn't a large monetization opportunity right now, is my contention. But, therefore, if they want to enter some of these vibrant markets, they really need to grow a portfolio. The first and easiest way to do that is to buy portfolios. There are no end of brokers around selling portfolios. So that's quite, if you've got money, that's probably the quickest way to get a defensive position. Failing that, you really need to grow your own portfolios in the medium to long term, but as we all know in this room, it takes 5 years to get anything granted. So that's a medium to long term. But I think the messages that I want to leave people with is, once you start to embark on that, for goodness sake, don't forget that in the future these assets will become revenue generating. This opportunity is not going to go away. It's here to stay. There may be changes in the legislation. Things may be different in 20 years' time, but right now, in the near to mid-term, there is a vibrant market to make money from intellectual property. Okay, so thank you very much. If anybody wants to talk to me after, I'll be very pleased to speak to them. I think, I can't remember now who's coming next. I should say that Daniel Pabst and Ian McClure, who are supposed to be here, couldn't make it. So actually it's Anders that's going to be next.